We look at more Ravens Combine notes, answer your mailbag questions, and more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Ravens podcast. I am your host, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all platforms. And thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're back here on a midweek edition of the show, and that does mean it's mailbag time. But we do have stuff to get into with the Combine. Of course, the Combine week is kicked off. We have Eric DeCosta actually speaking today at 1 p.m. So that'll be exciting to tune into and listen to his thoughts on this whole thing. So there's a lot to dive into in that regard. So we'll be talking Combine, of course, in the first segment, but we'll get more into what Joe Ortiz, the Ravens director of player personnel, had to say about some of the draft class in the second segment. That's mailbag questions. In the final segment, we'll look at more mock drafts from Twitter that we didn't get to on Mock Draft Monday. And thank you to everybody who did submit those. But let's dive into the content. Before we do that, though, be sure to make your first subscription Locked On Ravens YouTube, as we are looking for 1,000 subscribers. We're really close. We're creeping up on 900, and I greatly appreciate everybody who's already subscribed to the channel. And if you're thinking about it, I highly recommend you do so. Also, thank you for everybody who's listening in audio form, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Be sure to tune in anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at ChaosRecord34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's dive into our content here and start off with what Joe Ortiz had to say about some of the positional groups at the 2022 Combine. He talked about the draft class a lot and talked with Garrett Downing of BaltimoreRavens.com. The Ravens put it out. It's about a 7-minute video. It's a really nice listen. And, Ortiz goes into a bunch of details about some of the main positional groups that people have been wondering about. Obviously, the offensive tackles, the cornerbacks, running backs, those are the three that I guess kind of stuck out to me. So I want to kind of talk about those a little bit here, each of those and some of the points that he talked about. And he said that there are players, and Garrett Downing asked them, are there players who you could take at 14 who you could expect to be a day one starter, or not expect, but who you could theoretically have step in and be a day one starter if need be? And Joe Ortiz said, yeah, there are a couple really nice prospects, and obviously some of the guys that come to mind when looking at this offensive tackle class who could be available in the 14 range include guys like Trevor Penning, Charles Cross potentially being there. There are a couple guys in the second round too, or like this late first, early to mid second round who look good as well, like Daniel Falele, who we've talked about before on this show. Also like third round talent such as Abraham Lucas, let's say. But this is actually more of a very, very deep class in terms of offensive linemen in general. Maybe not so much the center position, but it seemed like Ortiz was confident in some of the guys in this draft class and at the offensive tackle position in particular. And I think that's obviously very encouraging because what you have, or what you saw last year, not great. Not great play out of the offensive tackles. Obviously, Ronnie Stanley was hurt. He only played one game, didn't look good in that game. Patrick McCary played well, but got pretty banged up towards the end of the year. So you're looking at Tyree Phillips, who's not a tackle at this point. I mean, I think he's a good guard. Just he's not a tackle. And obviously, Alejandro Villanueva didn't really get the job done. So they have Jawan James, but I would be shocked if they didn't take a tackle pretty early on. 2 days. I'd give it day one and day two. If they don't have one by then I'd start to say, what's going on here? But yeah, Ortiz seemed pretty confident in if the Ravens did take a player at 14, he would be able to potentially step in as that day one starter, and he would obviously have that talent to do so. But one of the more intriguing positional groups for me in this class, and for the Ravens in particular, it's corner. I mean, we've talked about corner for months and months on this show about how it could look different. Like the Ravens cornerback room could look different come even March when, it is March, but how the free agency works out with Anthony Averett, Jimmy Smith. The Ravens, they have, I think, a ton of good corners to pick from in this class. Now, there are, I think, a consensus top four in Derek Stingley, Sauce Gardner, Ahmad Gardner. You have Trent McDuffie and Andrew Booth, no particular order there. But it seems like Stingley's the number one guy right now, but he actually opted out of the combine. We'll talk about that a bit in the second segment. But we have really those top four guys. And when Ortiz was asked about some of them, he kind of stuck to the Stingley, Gardner, and McDuffie. But I feel like the Ravens, they're going to have a guy available at 14 at corner. Like, I don't see four corners going in the top 13 picks, and then the Ravens not having at least one of those guys to choose from. So I think that they will have an option there. And Ortiz kind of got into like they're a little bit different in size, but they're not small. They can play outside, and you like them there, but you can also move them inside. They have the positional versatility, and I know we all know how much the Ravens love that. So there are a lot of solid options, and Ortiz seemed very confident that if they got a player there, again, you could start him day one if you needed to, depending on how that corner room looks. Will Anthony Averett be back? There's that question. It's a continuous question I go back to because it is a very important one, all things considered. But I think it is very important to kind of prepare for the Ravens to take multiple secondary players in this draft. Like, their secondary in general, not even just looking at corners, but safety as well. Like, there could be changes there. So it's refreshing to see Ortiz feel confident about that top group. I know a ton of people want Sauce Gardner in Baltimore. Now, I am on that train. I am on the Sauce Gardner to Baltimore train. I would also love Derek Stingley, Andrew Booth, also Trent McDuffie. We'll talk more about in the second segment. I do like him a lot, but we'll kind of figure out who the Ravens could trade up for, trade down for. That'll be something we talk about. So the cornerback room for the Ravens could have a star added to an already star-studded room with one of those top four guys. And obviously the pass defense did not cut it in 2021. They'll have to figure that out. And I think a star corner at 14, there will be a difference maker there. It's a matter of, do the Ravens feel confident enough in that player to take them, or Ortiz seemed to be confident enough in those guys. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then finally, the last thing was the running backs that I kind of took away from this whole thing. And it's interesting to kind of feel out where the Ravens are with this running back situation, because Ortiz talked about a couple of guys, and I know the consensus among many is that the Ravens, they need to wait until like their last pick to take one, and they need to stock up on the offensive line and the defensive line and the corners. And like, yes, they do have to stock up on those positions, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens find a couple of guys here at this combine that they want to go more in depth with, and that kind of puts them up on their draft board a little bit, and they take a guy in the early fourth round or maybe late third round. I don't know. I think late third round might be a bit early for a running back. But yeah, again, Ortiz talked about kind of having guys like Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and then the recoveries and everything that goes into what it would take for the Ravens to take a running back. And it makes a lot of sense to kind of anticipate them taking one if Devonta Freeman does not return. And hey, look, I am on the Devonta Freeman running back 3 train. If that is what happens, I am completely content with that. I think he earned that job. But if it just doesn't work out, the Ravens could just get fresh legs in. I mean, the running back room was a huge issue in 2021. And I mean, look, we all know why. The injuries, the injuries really, really were tough. And obviously the Ravens had technically a top 5 rushing offense if you look at the box score stats. But, for people who watch this team, including myself, I think we all know that the Baltimore rushing offense was not a top 5 unit. So a lot of interesting notes by Joe Ortiz. Those 3 positions were ones I just wanted to touch on because there were comments made about them, and it kind of all interweaves into one. So it's really interesting. And of course, with the combine, these drills starting up soon, it'll be really fun to watch and figure out which guys up their stock and which guys, unfortunately, don't do that, because this is a huge, huge event. And obviously, it's not the only event. There are still pro days and everything, and the teams talk to guys and fall in love, don't fall in love, whatever it may be. But yeah, Joe Ortiz, a ton of great points. So if you want to check that video out, the Ravens put it on their Twitter. It's about a 7-minute video between Joe Ortiz and Garrett Downing. But we have a lot to talk about still. We're going to dive into a bunch about your mailbag questions. We have a ton of those. So that's coming up next here on Locked On Ravens. But before we do that, let me tell you a bit about BetOnline. And we're going to start something new here during these breaks a little bit when we have some reads to do. And I love talking about these guys. But BetOnline has a ton of odds, and it's not just football. Obviously, football's over, unfortunately, but basketball is in full swing. It's still in full steam. And for me, I'm a Denver Nuggets fan. And this will be like the basketball minute where I talk about basketball with BetOnline. It's going to be fun here. But Nikola Jokic, the Nuggets star player, is in the MVP conversation, going for back-to-back MVP. So if you are in the betting game, BetOnline has all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net. It is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. So if that is betting on the next NBA MVP, we'll have NFL odds kind of trickling in here, of course. And, as the draft gets closer, free agency, there'll be all types of different things over at BetOnline. And it's not just basketball, even though if you want to bet on that Nikola Jokic MVP, I'm not going to stop you, but betonline.net is your source for all things sports such as hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. So if you haven't already, go head over to the website today, or you can use your mobile device as well to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Make sure you're following Locked On NFL, though. It's Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. And of course, just like Locked On Ravens, it's free and available wherever you get your podcast. But we're going to talk about your mailbag questions now. We have 3 really good ones to dive into, mostly combine related, which, hey, combine's here. They should be combine related, right? So we'll dive now. 3 mailbag questions. Let's first talk about a comment actually from James Lee Katz, who says he's interested in seeing the DB 40 times. It may reshuffle the rankings a bit. And yeah, it's really funny because I know a lot of people, when looking at the combine and like just people who are watching it, a lot of people love the 40. Like they love just seeing guys zoom, and like obviously you have Chris Johnson, John Ross, a bunch of those really super fast guys. I mean, I posted a clip on Twitter yesterday of Mark Andrews running a 4.59 for a tight end. He's hauling. He's getting down that field. The clip is really cool. You should check it out actually, and it's really fun to see those guys zoom down the field. But for defensive backs in particular, Spencer Schultz talked about this on yesterday's show. Actually, it's a really nice episode we had. It's always great to have Spencer on. Be sure to check that episode out, actually, because he makes a lot of good points about the combine and just that combine preview. But Sauce Gardner, right, he's a player that he has so much to gain in this combine. And I agree with Spencer in the points he made that, look, if Sauce Gardner can run a blazing 40, he's already very athletic, has a ton of great athletic traits. If he can also showcase that speed in the 40, Sauce Gardner, I think that pushes him above Derek Stingley. And I love Derek Stingley. I also love Sauce Gardner. I think either one would be great in Baltimore. And I mean, other defensive backs as well. We talked about a couple in the first segment, but I think that if Sauce Gardner just shows out and has this amazing combine and tops it off with the 40, if he hits 4.2s, he's going top 5. I don't know if he's going to do that. It doesn't feel like he's going to, but if he's like mid 4.3s, 4.4 right on the dot there, like anywhere from 4.3 to 4.4, I think he has top 10 potential, and that's probably where he is going to go. There are a lot of teams in that top 10, top 12 that need a cornerback, and the Ravens sitting there at 14, they'll probably see a couple of guys, at least one corner, go off the board there. But it feels like with Derek Stingley, super uber talented player, had a phenomenal year during that LSU championship run, but has had a lot of inconsistencies recently. Obviously the injury, that's why he bowed out of this combine, and he didn't play a ton in 2021 due to that injury. But it feels like, again, Sauce Gardner, the one who's going to be on display. Obviously the rankings, it feels like right now is Stingley number 1, Gardner a very close second, probably Andrew Booth 3 and Trent McDuffie 4, although those guys are probably interchangeable. Like you could make an argument for McDuffie 3, Booth 4, vice versa. So yeah, I think the 40 has a huge implication on this, particularly Sauce Gardner. And obviously you're looking at some of the other guys as well, like the second, third round guys who could make a name for themselves. Kyler Gordon's one of those guys, Tariq Woolen, and there are those later-ish day 2 prospects or early day 3 prospects that could really benefit from having a stud 40 time. And it helps. I mean, people don't like, they don't get as excited for like the 3-cone or, the broad jump or whatever. And I enjoy all those things, but it seems like the 40 is the one that people are like, yeah, this is the one I want to see, right? So 40 is huge. I think for Sauce Gardner, it is very huge. I think this could be the thing that either catapults him into top 5, top 7, top 8 consideration, or the one that maybe he'll be available at 14, or even if the Ravens pass on him there in like the 18 range, if he doesn't have a great time. But I think that if he's there at 14, he's a guy the Ravens have to take. Same thing with Derek Stingley. So yeah, I'm excited to see the 40 times 2. This was a good comment here by James. Well, let's talk about a question from B Ward here. Sticking with the combine, which players are you interested in seeing the measurables and testing numbers for at the combine? Mine are offensive line, Cross, Linderbaum, Penning, edge, Ajabo, Karlaftis, Walker, defensive back, Gardner, McDuffie, Booth, defensive line, Wyatt, Winfrey, Hall, wide receiver, unlikely, Burks, Wilson, and London. Yeah, Drake London's very interesting to me. It does feel very unlikely the Ravens will take Drake London. I mean, obviously considering where he is projected to go in this draft, I would not advocate the Ravens spending that early of a pick on a wide receiver, even if it is guys like Chris Olave, et cetera, et cetera. I think that for me, the top guy, I talked about Sauce Gardner a bit, but to kind of switch it up, I think Trevor Penning is one that I'm very interested to see, because for me right now, and we'll get into this more a bit in a few minutes, Trevor Penning is not someone who I would take at 14 right now. And kind of another hot take, although this one might be a bit hotter, I would also not take Trent McDuffie at 14. I would trade back to like 18 for him. I think McDuffie's very, very talented. Like, I think he is one of the top corners in this draft, but I think you can trade back and still get him at 18 while picking up an extra third or extra fourth. Those two, to me, if they have great testing days, my stance will probably change. The great thing about the combine is literally, we just talked about it a little bit, it can make or break these guys' draft positions. I mean, it really can. There's a lot of stock put into it now. Certain teams value it in different ways. Like, some teams put a ton of stock in it, like take guys off completely if they have a bad testing day. Other guys will be a little more, or other teams will be a little bit more lenient and say, oh, you know what? We're not going to put everything on the testing numbers at the combine. But, for example, a great example, this is Adafe Owe, who tested very well at his pro day, had a absolutely monstrous pro day in a good way, pro day, and ended up catapulting up into that first round. So combine, pro days, there's a lot that goes into that. But yeah, for Trevor Penning, obviously there's been a lot of discourse about him and the fit on the Ravens. Had I'll call it 50-50 Senior Bowl week. I mean, there were the clips of him obviously just getting bull rushed back, with other ones of him just dominating defenders. So this is going to be interesting for me to see where he is. I mean, what are the testing numbers? How does he run? How does he do these drills? That's going to be really important. I mean, same thing for McDuffie. I'm expecting a very good testing day for McDuffie. I mean, I think he will test well with whatever tests he does. And obviously, Sauce Gardner is another one. I'm kind of just going through the ones that we would put here. George Karlaftis is one. Yeah, I want to see the testing numbers on Karlaftis. He is someone who, obviously, the talent is there. If he's there at 14, he's a very enticing pick, but this could push him into the top 10 as well. Kyler Gordon, I talked about, as like a second round corner, it feels like he'll be. So he'll be somebody who I'm very interested in seeing as well. Some of these running backs too. I mean, there are a bunch of running backs who I think could be fits for the Ravens. Obviously, we've talked about Hassan Haskins, Damian Pierce before. So those are all also players who I think the Ravens could most definitely look at some testing numbers from them and say, hey, this is a guy we should take in the early fourth round. Or this is a guy this is a guy that. So yeah, I think, yeah, B Ward hits a lot of these guys who I'm very interested in. Tyler Linderbaum's another one. He's someone who is, the scheme fit on him is it's out for debate right now. So we'll see if he's actually a fit. But at the end of the day, I think that the guys who I'm going to be keeping a close eye on, they are Trevor Penning, Sauce Gardner, Trent McDuffie, and also David Ajabo is a good one too. We will put him in here too. David Ajabo is another one for me for sure. And then on the defensive line, I think those are also very good names. I mean, Wyatt's somebody who he could catapult himself very far into the first round if he has a good testing day. So yeah, good names thrown out there by B Ward. And finally, let's get into a question by Positive Vibes 0611, and he asks thoughts on who we move up or down for if we were to do so. And yeah, this is a question that is really good because we're going to talk about this throughout the rest of draft season. But just as some initial thoughts, again, I kind of teased it a few minutes ago. Trevor Penning, someone I would trade down for. Trent McDuffie is someone I would trade down for. I don't think those two are players I would take at 14 now. Now, I have a feeling my stance on McDuffie is going to change in a couple days. Like I do. And this is not me saying, oh, I don't like Trent McDuffie. I don't like, the way he plays. I think he's a very talented player, like very, very talented. But again, I think you can just get him a bit later. But, that's a risk you have to run there. Trevor Penning is someone I'd take in the early mid-20s. I just, I got to wait for the combine to come out and the tested numbers to come out to see how the rankings adjust there. Guys I'd trade up for. Ike Ekwonu is my number one guy for this Ravens. Like I love Ike Ekwonu in a Ravens uniform. Just the thought of it. I love that thought. So Ike Ekwonu is someone if he falls to 5, I'm trading up. Like I know it'd probably cost a lot. He's that good. He is that good of a player. He would be a staple on that line for years. Positional versatility. I mean, he is a perfect prospect for the Ravens. Other guys, I mean, if Kyle Hamilton falls, I'd trade up for him. This is a hot take. I might, depending on what happens with Stingley, I would maybe trade up a spot or two, depending on what other teams need. I know that's probably not very likely, but I think I would trade up for him. Depending on what happens with Trayvon Walker, maybe that's a guy, if he falls to 10 after a great combine, maybe you trade up for him. But I'll go 2 and 2, like my overall guys. I would trade up for Ike Ekwonu, Kyle Hamilton, 2 guys I'd trade down for, Trevor Penning and Trent McDuffie. But 3 great mailbag questions. I love getting these mailbag questions. Again, if you want to submit yours for next week, I put out a tweet every Monday evening / night on the Locked On Ravens Twitter account, retweet it on my personal account. Be sure to put your questions on there. I answer them all, and it's fun to dive into them for sure. But still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. We're going to dive into mock drafts from Twitter, as we didn't get to all of them on Mock Draft Monday. So be sure to stick with us here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I'm going to tell you a bit about Built Bar. And this is the time of year, it's March now. It's crazy. It's March now. But people have given up on their New Year's resolutions, but don't do that. Be sure to make your New Year's resolution come true, especially if it is eating healthy. Do it with Built Bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They have a ton of different flavors as well. There's a ton to choose from. Mint brownies, one of the better ones out there. I mean, they're literally so many. Also, there are Built Bar Puffs. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs, you're missing out. Those are also covered in 100% real chocolate. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. Built Bars are low calorie. They're high protein. You can replace your candy bars with these. They're just better than them. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And other candy bars, I mean, they have maybe around 240 calories or 30 grams of sugar, or a dozen of net carbs, or even dozens of net carbs. And at Built Bar, they're all about the taste over there. I mean, they're great tasting bars. So be sure to go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15. Get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. We're back. Locked On Ravens here, our final segment. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen every day. Our next episode is going to be jam-packed with more Ravens content, so be sure to, again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us in audio form. We're going to be talking Ravens every single weekday, as long as I'm the host of this show, which I'm hoping is going to be for a very, very long time. It's been great hosting this show, and I love doing it every single weekday. But make your other listen here, make it Locked On NFL Draft, and make it your second listen right after Locked On Ravens. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. And of course, it's free and available on all platforms. So let's dive into a couple of mock drafts here that we didn't get to on Mock Draft Monday. Again, a huge thank you to everybody who ended up submitting mock drafts. It's fun to read through all of these, and we're probably not going to get to all of them here today as well. I'm gonna try to get through as many as I can, because these are just awesome. So let's start off here with a mock draft from Bry, who says another hyper athletic pass rusher, the right tackle of the future, and depth at left tackle in case Stanley isn't healthy, along with quality depth at positions of need. So David Ajabo is to pick at number 14, the edge. Daniel Falele, offensive tackle at pick 45, Leo Chenal. Linebacker at 76, Rasheed Walker, offensive tackle at 99, Nick Cross, safety at 108, Kobe Bryant, corner at 117, Donovan West, interior offensive lineman at 126. Then at 138, John Ridgway, interior defensive lineman, 140, Chigo Okonkwo, tight end out of Maryland, of course, and Tyler Legier, running back at 194. And yeah, I like this draft a lot. We talked about David Jabo and John Ridgway and Nick Cross on Mock Draft Monday. Rasheed Walker, that's another one. Going back to the second segment. That's another guy I'm interested to see testing numbers on. Rasheed Walker, I feel like, is an absolute steal. He's somebody who, if he has a great testing night, he can prop himself up into the second round. I feel like he's kind of flying under the radar a little bit. So I really like the value here that I got at 99. And then obviously getting Ajabo, Falele, and Rasheed Walker. I mean, those two, 45, 99, two offensive tackles. It's interesting because Bry has the Ravens taking 3 offensive linemen, which I feel like that's, again, the sweet spot number. I feel like 2 might be a bit too little, 4 might be a bit too many. So I think 3 is that sweet spot. 2 offensive tackles, 2 high up offensive tackles. The Ravens, they're going to address that position, and obviously getting a guy like Ajabo as well, getting a guy like Nick Cross and Chenal, all these talented players. This is a very good draft. And John Ridgway, also interior defensive lineman. He was the only interior defensive lineman taken here, and he is somebody who I think is flying very under the radar and is one of my favorite day 3 picks, at least. So a very nice mock draft from Bry. Positional value, best player available. I love that draft for sure. Next here, though, let's get into a question from Brian, the one and only, who has the Ravens taking Devin Lloyd, linebacker from Utah at number 14. Daniel Falele, tackle from Minnesota at 46. Max Mitchell, tackle from Louisiana, 78. John Paschal, edge at 102. 107, Marcus Jones, corner from Houston. Sky Moore, wide receiver from Western Michigan at 116. Kirby Joseph, safety, 125. Neil Farrell Jr., defensive lineman, 140. Rashad White, running back at 141. Jarrett Patterson, center at 193. And Jelani Woods, tight end at 231. This is, again, two tackles early, which the Ravens, they have to be cautious with the Ronnie Stanley injury. They have to be at this point. You can't go into the year, if you're Baltimore, with what you did last year. And Eric DeCosta acknowledged, hey, the betting on Ronnie Stanley injury maybe wasn't the most amazing idea in the world, but look, they thought they could do it, and now it's a decision they made. This time around, I think they will make a different decision, and Eric DeCosta made it pretty clear. I feel like they're going to. So getting a guy, again, I think that Falele is someone who, with good testing numbers, could catapult into the early first round, or not early first round, late first round, early second round. So I think getting him at 46 is great. Devin Lloyd is an interesting pick, though. I know that, again, the Micah Parsons comparisons have been there a little bit. I don't know if that's his game necessarily. I feel like he's not necessarily the athlete that Parsons is, but he's still very athletic, don't get me wrong. But I like this a lot. Devin Lloyd is more of the best player available strategy, which the Ravens do, and we've seen them do it. And then you have other players like Marcus Jones, I like a lot. He's someone who's been mocked a lot in our mock drafts we've looked at. Kirby Joseph is someone I like as well. Sky Moore is interesting. He's another guy I want to see the testing numbers on. I'm kind of remembering guys with these mock drafts here. But yeah, I like this mock draft a lot from Brian, the one and only. Let's now, though, talk about a mock draft from Jafar, who said, took what they gave me, which is what you should do in mock drafts. If the mock draft simulator gives it to you, you should take it. So we have Travon Walker, edge at 14. Daniel Falele, offensive tackle at 45. Jalen Windermeyer, 76. Quay Walker, linebacker at 99. James Cook, running back at 108. Kobe Bryant, corner at 117. Nick Cross, safety at 126. John Ridgway, interior defensive lineman at 138. Tyrese Robinson, interior offensive lineman at 140. And Matt Hankins, corner at 194. So yeah, Travon Walker, I feel like he's not going to be available at 14, to be honest. I mean, once testing numbers happen and he's already getting a ton of hype after what he did the Senior Bowl, I mean, I think that he is going to go before the Ravens pick. But if he's there at 14, again, you take what the mock draft simulator gives you. I give Jafar a lot of credit for doing that. Again, Falele, someone who we've talked about. I like the pick there at 45. Tight end into the third round. I think it's fine. Like, maybe I'd take him at 108 instead. I'd take a tight end at 108 instead and kind of flip positions, or maybe 117, like corner at 76 and tight end at 117. But again, you got to take the guys where the mock draft simulator project him to go or else they'll be gone if you like the player. So I think that for me, I picked Jeremy Ruckert in that spot for mock draft Monday. Quay Walker's a very interesting prospect to me. James Cook, brother of Dalvin, very interesting player there as well. John Ridgeway keeps popping up, and he's someone who I think, again, day 3 steal for me. The Ravens don't take a corner in this mock until 117. I don't hate that. I think this is a deep corner class. They're obviously the studs that we've all talked about and that we talked about before on this show. But yeah, I think this is a very good mock draft here from Jafar. There are a couple things, there's only one edge rusher. Usually we'll see people take 2. I'm totally fine with just 1, although it does depend what happens in free agency overall, in my opinion. And finally, we'll get into a mock draft here from Carter, who has the Ravens taking Trayvon Walker at number 14. Bernard Raymond, offensive tackle at 45. Fidarian Mathis, interior defensive lineman at 76. Jalen Windermeyer, tight end at 99. Quay Walker, 108, a linebacker. Alec Lindstrom, interior offensive lineman at 117. Josh Joby, corner at 126. Nick Cross, safety at 138. Jerome Ford, running back at 140. And Isaac Taylor Stewart, the corner at 194. So, again, corner at 126 here was the first one taken. Again, I do not hate that. I think that getting 2 in the later rounds would be fine for them. But again, it does kind of depend what happens in free agency. Trayvon Walker, we did talk about. Raymond's very interesting. Started off as a tight end, ended up going to really a lot. He did a lot of work to get to be an offensive tackle, and he's a very good one at that. Still pretty raw. Like, he is a pretty raw player, but showed a ton in the very limited snaps that he had at offensive tackle. I mean, comparing to some of the other guys. Quay Walker, I do like Quay Walker. Alec Lindstrom would be a nice center option for them. Nick Cross, again, that's a potential-based pick. I mean, Cross could still give a lot to a team who drafts him, but it's more of like he does have a lot of traits to develop and can develop into a very high-end starter. So, like a Brandon Stevens pick, I know they're a little different players, and that I made that comparison on Monday. But yeah, I like this mock draft. Again, Trayvon Walker, I don't know if he's going to be there at 14, but then it's edge, offensive tackle, interior defensive lineman. Those are 3 needs that we have talked about consistently on this show, and Carter addresses them. The corner one, again, maybe like I'm taking a corner at 99 and a tight end at 126, but I don't hate the Jalen Weidermeyer pick. I think that's a pretty good tight end there. And then obviously a running back at 140, which is around the area I would project the Ravens to take one, maybe 126 to 140 would be that. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. When we get back here tomorrow, we're diving into more Ravens talk, of course, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.